It's funny how people say the past is behind you, like it's a road you walked, something you can just leave, like an old town you moved out of. But for me, the past has always been more like a basement, quiet, cold, and still alive. You don't see it most days. You learn to step over it, like a creaky board in the hallway you avoid by habit, but it's still there, underneath, waiting. I guess I should start with now. My name's Eleanor Ward. I'm 38. I run a small bookstore in upstate New York, one of those charming little towns people pass through in the fall when the leaves are pretty. I live above the shop. It's convenient. Small kitchen, creaky floors, too many mugs I never use. The walls are white, mostly because I haven't bothered to paint them. Most days I open at 10, play soft jazz or old records I found in my mother's attic, and pretend the world doesn't ask much of me. People come in, buy things they don't need, and leave smelling like cinnamon and second chances. And I stay behind, always staying behind. I think if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd say it looks peaceful, maybe even charming. But inside, it's like I'm underwater. Not drowning, just suspended, like everything I feel is muffled. I've been this way for a long time, since I was 12 maybe. That's the year my father left. No fights, no yelling, no final goodbye. He just left one morning and didn't come back. You'd think there would be more to say about something like that, but honestly, that's the part I remember most clearly. The empty chair at breakfast, the coffee still warm in his mug, the quiet, like a bruise spreading through the house, and my mother, she didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stood there at the sink, stared out the window, and said, "Well, I guess that's that." And then she rinsed a plate that wasn't dirty, like her whole marriage could be washed down the drain with a little dish soap and denial. I didn't understand it then. I mean, what child really does? But I felt it. The silence, the space he left behind, how everything in our house got smaller after he left, even though nothing had moved. And I learned, that day, that people don't always leave with doors slamming. Sometimes they leave quietly, and the sound of them not coming back is somehow louder. I didn't tell anyone at school what happened. I think some part of me was embarrassed. Like his leaving was something I caused. Like I loved too much, or not enough, and that's why he left. Kids at that age, they pick up on things fast. They knew when something shifted. I remember my best friend Tara asking if everything was okay at home. I smiled so hard it hurt and told her, "Yeah, of course, everything's fine." It became a reflex. Smile. Deflect. Move on. Even now, 38 years old, I still do it. Someone asks if I'm seeing anyone, if I'm happy, if I've talked to my family recently. Smile. Deflect. Change the subject. I wonder what it says about a person when pretending is more natural than telling the truth. My mother changed after he left. Or maybe she didn't change. Maybe she just stopped pretending too. She went from gentle to distant, like someone had turned a dimmer switch and forgotten where the max setting was. She still made dinner, still folded my clothes, but the warmth, that was gone. There were no more hugs after school, no more movie nights on the couch, no more "I'm proud of yous," not even the hollow kind. Just silence, and short clipped sentences, like everything she gave to him, all the soft parts of her, disappeared with his car that morning. I started staying late at the library after school, not because I loved reading, not back then, but because the librarian spoke softly and remembered my name, and because the quiet there felt less lonely than the quiet at home. I think that's when I stopped hoping he'd come back. Not when he missed my birthday, or Christmas, but the day I realized my mother had buried her pain so deep, she forgot how to feel mine. I never blamed her. Not really, but I stopped reaching for her, too. Some nights I'd lie awake and stare at the ceiling, wondering where he was. If he thought about me, if he'd remarried, if he missed the sound of my voice when I asked him to tuck me in. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'd imagine he came back, knocking at the door, holding flowers, apologizing, explaining, But that version of him only lived in my daydreams. The real one disappeared and stayed gone for 26 years. It was a Thursday when the letter came. I remember because it was raining. That slow, persistent kind of rain that makes the whole world feel like it's in mourning. I almost didn't check the mailbox. I usually don't. Most of what I get are bills, catalogues I never signed up for, or postcards from authors trying to promote their next book tour. But that day, for some reason, I did. It was just one envelope. No return address. The paper felt old, yellowed at the corners, and the handwriting. It was shaky, but familiar. Too familiar. It took me 3 full minutes to open it. Even as my fingers slipped beneath the seal, part of me thought, no, it can't be. But it was. Dear Elena, you don't have to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you tore it up. But I hope you won't. I'm in Hudson Pines now. That's a care facility just off Route 12. They said I should reach out, that it's time. I've been sick for a while. Not just sick, I guess. Dying. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you, but I'd like to see you if you'd let me. I think about you every day. Dad. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat there on the stairs, holding the letter like it was some kind of trick, some prank the universe decided to play after 2 decades of silence. The name at the bottom made my stomach turn. Dad. Not Robert, not Mr. Ward, not the man who left. He still signed it like he was entitled to that word. I reread the letter 5 times that night, not because I didn't understand it, but because I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, grief, or maybe it was something I didn't want to admit, a sliver of longing I thought I'd buried ages ago. He was dying, and suddenly, every scar I thought I'd healed started aching again. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the ceiling, just like I used to when I was 12, except this time I wasn't wondering where he was. Now I knew. Hudson Pines, Route 12, a facility for people who are on their way out. I Googled it. Of course I did. It looked fine, clean, institutional, all beige walls and polite smiles. There was even a virtual tour, like picking a hotel room for your deathbed. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some part of me hoped it would be awful, so I'd have an excuse not to go. But it wasn't, and that made it harder. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not my co-worker Lila, who's practically family. Not my therapist, who I hadn't seen in 3 months anyway. It felt too fragile to speak out loud, like saying it would make it real, and then I'd have to do something about it. But the question kept circling me like a hawk. What if I don't go? What if I let him die alone? What if I rob myself of answers, or closure, or whatever it is people chase when someone who hurt them suddenly reappears? And then the darker thought came, the one I didn't want to say, even to myself. What if he says he's sorry, and I don't care? What does that make me? Cold, broken, beyond repair. I kept the letter on the kitchen counter for 3 days, folded, unfolded, read again. It was like a wound I couldn't stop touching. And every time I looked at it, I thought of that morning when I was 12, the way the coffee steamed in his mug, still hot, still full, the way my mother stared out the window like something had been torn out of her chest and replaced with stone, and me, standing there, barefoot in the kitchen, thinking, this must be what being unwanted feels like. It was Lila who finally asked. She stopped by the shop on Monday to drop off some muffins and inventory invoices. She took one look at me and said, "You're somewhere else. What's going on?" I almost lied, but I didn't. Maybe I was too tired, or maybe some part of me needed someone to know. So I told her. Not the whole thing, just the basics. "My father sent me a letter," I said, voice flat. "He's dying, wants to see me." She paused for a second, then said, "Well, are you going?" I shrugged. "I don't know." She didn't push, didn't tell me what I should do. She just looked at me, really looked, and said, "Whatever choice you make, just make sure it's for you, not for who you think you need to be." I cried after she left. Not big theatrical sobs, just silent tears that snuck out when I wasn't paying attention. The next morning, I packed a bag, threw in a sweater I haven't worn in years, a book I knew I wouldn't read. I closed the shop early, taped a handwritten sign to the door, closed for personal reasons, back soon. And then I got in the car and started driving. The roads out of town felt different somehow, like I was being pulled back into a story I never finished. The clouds hung low. The air was thick. Everything smelled like rain that hadn't come yet. I passed old gas stations, diners with half-lit signs, and cornfields that went on forever. And with every mile, I felt it. The ache of memory clawing its way back up my throat. The last time I'd seen him, I was 12. Now I was 38, an entire lifetime in between. What do you even say to the man who disappeared from your life, then asked to be let back in only because he's dying? What words could possibly fit in a moment like that? I didn't know, but I kept driving. By the time I reached Hudson Pines, the sky had darkened. A storm was coming. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching the light flicker through the windows, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight. I thought about turning around, thought about pretending the drive never happened, going home, making tea, curling up with a book and forgetting I ever got that letter. But I didn't. I opened the car door, stepped into the wind, and walked toward this front entrance, not because I forgave him, not because I understood, but because I needed to know, did he miss me? Did he ever feel sorry? And who the hell was he, really, outside of the story I wrote in my head just to survive? The nurse at the front desk was kind, too kind. The kind that makes your skin itch, because it means they know something you don't, something hard. I told her my name. She looked down at the clipboard, nodded. "He's been asking about you," she said gently, like I was a child about to visit a dying pet. Room 112, East Wing. Straight past the vending machines and the faded painting of a forest that didn't feel like any forest I've ever stood in. I walked slowly. Each step felt like its own act of rebellion. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and overripe bananas, and time. Like everything here was holding its breath. I reached the door. My hand hovered just above the handle. And for a second, I couldn't do it. My heart was loud, a full drumline behind my ribs. My palms were damp, my lips dry. I thought of everything I wanted to say, the rage, the grief, the questions with teeth, and then I opened the door. He was smaller than I remembered, thinner, paler, like life had been leaking out of him slowly, drop by drop. His hair was grey, patchy. His eyes looked sunken, but still the same shape. Still my father's eyes. Still the eyes I remembered from bedtime stories and firefly summers and Sunday pancakes before everything cracked. When he saw me, his face changed. Not shock, not guilt. Just this quiet devastation, like something inside him broke. "Elena," he whispered, and I almost didn't recognize my name in his mouth. It had been so long. For a full minute, we just stared at each other. No hugs, no reaching out, just two people, and the wreckage between them. Finally, I spoke. "You look different." He gave a soft, brittle laugh. "Yeah, time will do that." A silence settled between us, the kind that doesn't invite comfort. And then he said, "I wasn't sure you'd come." I didn't answer that, because the truth was, neither was I. I sat down in the chair by his bed. It creaked under my weight, even though I'm not heavy. Everything about this room felt like it was holding on by a thread. "So," I said, staring at the floor, "you're dying." He nodded. "Liver failure. Among other things. Guess the years caught up." Another silence, then barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I didn't look at him, because part of me wanted to scream, To say, sorry? That's all you have. 26 years and a letter and sorry. But another part of me, the part that had curled in on itself as a little girl, that part just whispered, say it again. So I did, out loud this time. Say it again. He blinked, surprised, and then he did. I'm sorry, Elena, for all of it. For leaving, for not coming back, for not being the man you deserved. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't just asking for forgiveness. He was trying to make peace with his own story before it ended, and I didn't know if I could give him that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I could sit there. I could bear witness, because sometimes the closest thing to justice is being seen by the person who broke you. I stayed for an hour. We didn't say much more. When I stood up to leave, he asked if I'd come again. I didn't make any promises, just said, we'll see. And I walked out. The wind had picked up. The first drops of rain finally started to fall. And as I drove back down Route 12, headlights cutting through the dark, I didn't feel peace, but I felt something, like a shift, like the moment a storm breaks and the air tastes different. The story wasn't over, but for the first time in years, it had finally started moving again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just sort of drifted in and out, slipping between thoughts that didn't want to be quiet and memories that kept showing up without permission. I kept hearing his voice, that raspy, tired whisper of my name, Eleanor, like it was made of regret and salt water. It stayed with me long after I left the hospital, like it had burrowed under my skin. When morning came, I sat at the edge of my bed, feet on the cold floor, staring at nothing. There was a mug on the nightstand, coffee I forgot to drink, still full, ice cold. I should have gotten up, taken a shower, checked emails, done normal things, but all I could do was sit there, remembering the sound of a door closing. Not the hospital door. No, that door. From 26 years ago. He'd left on a Thursday. Funny how the brain picks certain things to remember. Not the exact date, not what I wore, but that it was cloudy and that it was Thursday. I was 9, old enough to know something was wrong, too young to understand it fully. He packed a small suitcase, black with a busted zipper. Didn't take much, just clothes, a razor, some papers, a book I never saw again. He said he was going on a trip, just for a few days, baby. He kissed my forehead. I remember that part, because it was the last time he touched me for over 2 decades. My mom stood in the kitchen the whole time, pretending to stir something that wasn't there. Her face was unreadable, not angry, not sad, just locked. Like if she allowed one expression to slip through, she'd completely fall apart. When he left, she didn't look out the window. She just wiped the counter. Twice. I asked if he was coming back. She said, he made his choice. I didn't ask again. Instead, I waited. For weeks. Sitting on the front porch after school, watching cars, jumping at the sound of every engine that slowed. It took a long time for the waiting to stop feeling like hope and start feeling like abandonment. Now, 26 years later, he said he was sorry, and I didn't know what to do with that. Because sorry doesn't rewind time. It doesn't uncrack bones. It doesn't fill empty birthdays or undo the way your voice starts to tremble every time someone says, Father. I wanted to believe he meant it, but belief, it's fragile, especially when it's been broken before. The sun started pushing through the blinds. Lines of pale light cut across the floor. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mum. Are you coming by today? Need help with the shed. No question about the hospital. No mention of him. Of course, because in her world, he doesn't get to exist anymore. But now, he does. He exists in my thoughts, in the ache behind my eyes, in the sudden flood of everything I thought I had safely buried. I picked up the mug. poured the cold coffee down the sink. Then I stood there for a long time, both hands braced on the counter, trying to decide who I was going to be that day. The daughter who helps her mother pretend none of this is happening, or the woman who demands to know the truth. My stomach turned, because the truth is rarely gentle, and almost never clean. I drove to my mother's house in silence. No music, no podcast, just the sound of the road, and my own teeth clenching. I hadn't told her I saw him. Didn't know how to bring it up. What do you say to the woman who raised you when the man she tried to erase just reappeared, sick, frail, and asking for forgiveness? The neighborhood looked the same. Same cracked sidewalk, same porch swing that groaned in the wind, same front door with the chipped blue paint. Only now, it felt like walking into a ghost version of my childhood, like time had frozen here. But I hadn't. She was in the backyard, sorting old boxes near the shed, wearing gardening gloves, humming something I couldn't place. When she saw me, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Glad you could come," she said, like we were strangers making small talk in a grocery store. "That old lawnmower's giving me hell." I nodded, took the wrench from her hand without a word. She didn't ask how I was, didn't ask what I'd been doing, and definitely didn't ask if I'd gone to Hudson Pines. We worked in silence, just the clink of metal, the rustle of dried leaves, and the weight of everything unsaid pressing on both of us. Finally, I broke. "I saw him," I said quietly. Her shoulders stiffened, just barely. "Saw who?" I gave her a look, sharp, unapologetic. She sighed, tugged her gloves off, finger by finger. "Why would you do that, Eleanor?" The question hit me like a slap. Not "how is he?" Not "are you okay?" Just, why? "He's dying," I said. Her face didn't change, not a flicker. That's not my problem. The way she said it, flat, controlled, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. I stepped back, felt something inside me pull tight, like a fraying wire about to snap. He asked for me. That got her, just for a second. Her lip trembled, but she swallowed it down fast, like she always does. Of course he did. That man only calls when he wants something. I wanted to yell, to scream. He's not the only one who kept things from me. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching her go back to her boxes, like we hadn't just reopened a wound 2 decades deep. "Did you know he was sick?" She hesitated, just for a second. "No." But I knew her too well. She was lying, or at least, not telling the whole truth. We worked in silence for a while longer. She passed me a box of old books. Some of them were his. Still had his handwriting in the margins. I wondered why she kept them. If she hated him so much, why not throw them out? Maybe part of her couldn't. Maybe part of her still remembered something softer, something that once felt like love. "He said you pushed him out," I blurted. She froze, then turned to me, slow and deliberate. Her eyes were sharp. "He said what?" "That you made him leave." She laughed, some short, bitter. "Of course he did." Then her voice softened. "Elena, you were a child. You remember things in pieces, fragments, not the whole." "Then tell me the whole." She didn't. Not yet. She just picked up another box, walked toward the porch, and before she disappeared inside, she turned to me and said, "Some men don't leave once. They leave you a little more every day, until you finally stop asking them to stay." I stood there for a long time after that, alone, holding a wrench I didn't need anymore, feeling like a child again, not the kind that's innocent, but the kind that's invisible. I didn't plan to go back, not so soon, maybe not ever. But 3 days later, I found myself parking outside Hudson Pines again, heart hammering, palms damp, brain loud. I told myself it was curiosity, closure, some noble psychological pursuit, but the truth, it was messier than that. I wanted answers. I wanted apologies. And maybe, and deep down, I wanted to see if he still looked at me like I was someone worth asking for. Room 214, same as before. He was awake this time, propped up with pillows, TV on low. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Elena," he said, like it was a prayer, like he was surprised I'd actually come back. "You came." I nodded, stepped inside, closed the door behind me. I didn't sit. Not yet. "You said you had things to tell me." He looked away for a moment, swallowed. His voice, when it came, was thin but steady. "I did love your mother. Once." I said nothing. "But we weren't right, not after a while. She was—" He paused, searching for the word. "Hard. Unforgiving." I crossed my arms, felt my jaw tighten. "She says you left." I did. He looked straight at me. But it wasn't like that. He coughed, a wet, broken sound that made my stomach twist, then continued. "I tried, Elle. I did. But your mom, she shut me out. For years. Everything had to be her way. There was no room for me. No room for mistakes." I stared at the floor. Some part of me wanted to believe him. Another part heard my mother's voice. "That man only calls when he wants something." "Did you cheat on her?" I asked, quietly. His eyes dropped. Yes. There it was, simple, clean. And yet it made everything murkier. "More than once?" A long pause. "Twice, maybe 3 times. But it wasn't like I was in love with them," I cut in. He didn't answer. Didn't have to. I sat down then, not because I was comfortable, but because I suddenly felt too heavy to keep standing. He watched me for a moment. Then he whispered, "You remind me of her, but softer, kinder." I flinched, because I didn't want to be a version of her, didn't want to be a version of either of them. I just wanted to be myself. "Why didn't you stay for me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His mouth twitched. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to." "Then why didn't you?" He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something behind his eyes I hadn't seen before. Shame. Because I was weak and selfish, and I thought, "You'd be better off without me." I felt my throat burn, but I didn't let the tears come, not yet. "You thought wrong." He nodded, didn't defend himself, just nodded. Then he reached for something on the bedside table, a small beat-up photo tucked in a folded envelope. He handed it to me. It was me. 9 years old, grinning, gap-toothed, wearing a red sweater I vaguely remembered hating. On the back, his handwriting. My reason. I wanted to scream, to throw it in his face, to say, "Then why the hell did you leave your reason behind?" But all I could do was sit there, photo in hand, trying to make sense of a man who'd cracked my foundation and was now trying to rebuild something on top of the wreckage. He closed his eyes, exhausted. "I know I don't deserve anything from you, Elle. Not even this visit. But thank you for coming back." I didn't answer, because I didn't know why I did either. I was 13, and I couldn't sleep. Not because of anything special, just that kind of restless, skin-too-tight feeling teenage girls get when everything is changing and nothing makes sense. The house was dark. I crept down for water, barefoot, careful not to wake Mum. The floorboards creaked under me like old bones. Then I heard it. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, broken sound, like a balloon slowly deflating coming from the kitchen. I froze, peered around the hallway corner, and there she was, my mother, sitting at the kitchen table, head bowed, both hands clutching a coffee mug she wasn't drinking from. She was crying, silently, like she was afraid someone, even God, might hear her. I stood there, hidden, heart pounding, because I didn't know mums could cry, at least not mine. She was iron and vinegar, a woman who made pain look efficient. She ironed grief into silence, folded rage into chores. never once cracked in front of me. Until that night. She didn't see me, didn't know I was there, just sat there, shoulders shaking every so often, like her body couldn't hold the weight anymore. I remember the mug had a chip in it, a tiny one near the rim. Funny how that's the part I focused on. Not her red eyes, not her trembling hands, but the chipped mug, because that felt safer. After a few minutes, she stood up slowly and poured the coffee down the sink. I ducked behind the wall again, holding my breath, listening to the sound of water, then silence. I rushed back upstairs, slipped into bed, pretended I never saw anything. The next morning, she made pancakes like nothing happened, asked me if I studied for my math quiz, and I played along, because I didn't know what else to do. Because I was 13, and she was my whole world, and if she broke, what would that make me? It wasn't until years later, after she stopped talking about him altogether, after the divorce papers became just another yellowing file in a kitchen drawer, that I realized something. She hadn't cried because he left. She cried because he made her feel forgettable, not hated, not loved, just erased. And that's a kind of cruelty you don't come back from. I unlocked the door to my apartment like I was breaking into someone else's life. Everything was where I left it. Shoes by the door, blanket tossed on the couch, a stack of unopened mail. The quiet wrapped around me like wool, thick, suffocating, fake warm. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the sink and stood there for a long moment, just listening, to the refrigerator hum, to the traffic murmuring through double-paned glass, to the questions clanging in my skull. Why did he keep the photo? Why did she keep his books? Why did both of them act like they were the victim? And why did I feel like collateral damage in a war that started before I was even born? I sat on the floor, not the couch, not the bed, the floor. Because that's where you go when you need to feel grounded, but everything inside you is floating off somewhere, untethered. I opened the envelope again. The photo he gave me, my 9-year-old face beaming back, so innocent, so clueless, and I hated her, not the child, but the girl I used to be, because she believed they'd protect her. She believed love was unconditional. She believed someone would always choose her. I was wrong. She was wrong. I picked up my phone, scrolled, stopped at my mum's contact, then scrolled again, and stopped at Dad, her Hudson Pines. Both names stared back at me like weights. One raised me with walls, the other raised me by disappearing. I didn't call either, just put the phone face down, turned off the lights, and let the dark wrap around me. But that night, the dreams came, and they weren't dreams, they were memories, fragments, a door slamming, my mother yelling something muffled, bitter, a man's voice, not shouting but final, me, hiding behind the hallway wall, breath held, footsteps, then silence. I woke up crying, not loud, not messy, just wet cheeks, clenched jaw, heart cracked open, and one thought that wouldn't let go. Maybe they both lied, just in different languages. It came just after 7 a.m. I was still in bed, eyes swollen from another night of non-sleep, mind raw from digging through ghosts. The phone buzzed once, twice, then silence, then again. I reached for it, more annoyed than alarmed, but the moment I saw the name, my body went cold. Aunt Mel, my father's older sister, the only one from his side who hadn't completely vanished after he did. I hadn't spoken to her in maybe 3 years. I answered, heart pounding. Elena? Her voice was thin, shaky, not like her usual breezy wine at 5 tone. Yeah, hi. Is everything... It's your dad. He took a turn last night. I sat up straight. What kind of turn? He's not responsive this morning. They think it's the liver, or maybe an infection. He's not talking. He didn't even open his eyes when I came in. She paused. You might want to come, if want to. I stared at the floor for a long time after the call ended, phone still in my hand, everything else slipping. There was no clear instruction, no manual for this kind of thing. How do you prepare for the possible death of someone you're not sure you've forgiven? Someone who loved you, maybe, but also left you. Someone who's now a shell in a hospital bed and might never open his eyes again. I didn't pack right away, didn't move, just sat there, wrapped in the thick fog of indecision. A part of me wanted to ignore it, let the moment pass, say, he made his bed, let him lie in it. But another part, a quieter, smaller part, whispered something else. What if this is the last chance to ask, to hear the truth, even if it hurts, to say goodbye, not for him, but for me? I got dressed slowly, threw a sweater in my bag, my journal, the photo he gave me, and the chipped coffee mug I'd somehow kept after Mum passed, the one from the night she cried. I didn't know why I brought it, maybe to remind myself that grief isn't always loud, and that love sometimes doesn't look like love at all. As I locked my door behind me, I whispered out loud, I don't know if I forgive you, but I'm coming. And somehow that felt like enough for now. The hospital smelled like bleach and loss. Not the fresh kind of clean, the desperate kind, the kind that tries to cover up everything dying underneath. Room 407. I walked down that hall like someone walking toward a version of herself she tried to forget. Aunt Mel met me at the door. She didn't hug me, just squeezed my arm and whispered, He's been in and out, mostly out. I nodded, heart hammering, hands cold. Then I stepped in. There he was, my father, but not. He looked smaller, shrunken somehow, as if time had been folding him up bit by bit until only the outline of him remained. His skin was yellowed, eyes closed, lips cracked. Machines beeped around him like a rhythm I couldn't follow. I stood at the foot of the bed, silent. Looking at him felt like looking through water. Blurred, unreal, distant. And then he opened his eyes, just barely. Elena? His voice was gravel, barely there. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know who he was calling. The child version of me, the grown one, the daughter he left, or the one he suddenly remembered now that the world was closing in. He blinked slowly. You came. I swallowed hard. I did. Silence. A long one. The kind that makes your ribs ache. I didn't think you would, he said finally. I almost didn't. I'm sorry. Those words hung in the air, awkward, half-formed, like a child trying to apologize for something too big to name. I sat in the chair beside him, folded my hands, waited. He turned his head just slightly, eyes glossy. I thought leaving would protect you, that staying would ruin you. He coughed. Pain etched every movement across his face. But I ruined you anyway, didn't I? I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, because both were true. I was afraid, he whispered. Of what? Of turning into him, my father. He closed his eyes for a moment. He hit. I walked. Thought that was better. Cleaner. But I see now. Absence cuts just as deep. My throat tightened. You didn't just walk, I said. You disappeared. I know. A single tear slid down his temple. He didn't wipe it away, just let it fall. Why now? I just said. Why the photo? Why the letters? His voice cracked. Because dying does something to a man. It makes you remember the weight of what you dropped. I looked at him then, really looked. Not the father I waited for, not the story I built in my head, but the broken man he'd always been. And for the first time, I didn't feel hate. I felt the empty shape of it, where it had been, where it used to burn. Now only quiet. We sat in silence for a while, machines beeping, his breathing shallow, my thoughts louder than both. I didn't come here for closure. I didn't even know what closure meant, but something inside me wanted truth, even if it came too late to save anything. "Tell me about Mom," I said quietly. His eyes flickered. "What about her? Why didn't you fight for her? For me?" He blinked, then turned his gaze to the ceiling, like the truth was up there, somewhere he hadn't dared to look. "I loved her. God, I did. But she loved me like I was a wound she couldn't stop picking." He coughed again. "Longer this time. We weren't good together, not after you were born. We tried to fake it, for you. But your mom, she had her own scars, and I had mine." His voice softened. "I didn't leave just because of the other woman. I left because I was drowning." I stared at him. "So what, she pushed you out? Or you just ran?" He didn't answer right away. "Both. She threatened to take you, said I'd never see you again, said if I stayed, I had to be the kind of man I didn't know how to be." He finally looked at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. "So I left. I thought maybe it was mercy. Maybe she'd raise you better without me." I clenched my fists. "You could have come back. You could have written. You let me think you didn't care." "I did care," he said, almost angry. "But shame. Shame is a hell of a thing, Eleanor. It grows teeth." I exhaled through my teeth. "You didn't even say her name in the letters." He closed his eyes. "I know." "Say it." He hesitated. "Your mother's name was Claire." It hit me harder than I expected, not because I didn't know, but because I'd never heard it in his voice. Not once. "You didn't even mourn her," I said. "I mourned her in silence," he whispered. "I mourned everything in silence." Silence again. He started coughing, harder this time. I stood, reached for the nurse call button, but he grabbed my wrist, surprisingly strong. "Wait." His eyes burned into mine. "There's something else, something I never told you." I swallowed, waited. "Your mom, she wasn't always stable. She had moments, darkness. It got worse after you were born." He let go of my wrist. "She said things to you, did things, not hitting, but she used her words like knives." I froze. Memories surfaced. Small, crooked, slippery. My mother screaming, my hands over my ears. Her face, not cruel but lost. "You remember it, don't you?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I didn't leave just because I was a coward," he said. "I left because I thought getting out was the only way to stop hurting both of you." He coughed again, this time deeper, longer. The monitor beside him blinked, and that's when I realized he was telling me goodbye, in his way, in the only way he knew how. I left the room quietly, didn't look back, because if I did, I was afraid I'd see a version of myself still sitting there, still waiting for a better ending. The hallway felt longer this time. The buzzing lights above, the scuff of my shoes against the tile, the smell of something sterile, but not clean. Outside, the air was thick with humidity, but I could breathe. For the first time in, I don't know how long, I sat on a cold metal bench under a dying tree in the hospital's courtyard, and I cried. Not the kind of crying that shakes your body, not the cinematic kind, just tears. Quiet, slow, like a leak in a dam that had held too much for too long. Everything he said kept replaying in my mind. "I thought leaving would protect you. I mourned everything in silence. Your mother's words were knives. I wanted to scream, punch something, or maybe run back inside and ask one last question. But I didn't, because I knew I had all the answers I was going to get, and they weren't clean, or pretty, or even enough, but they were real. And sometimes, real is the only thing we get. I opened my bag, pulled out the chipped coffee mug, held it in both hands like a relic from some forgotten church. Inside, there were still traces of dried coffee from home. From her. From before. I thought of Mom again, of how she'd look through me when she was angry, of the way her hands would tremble when she thought I couldn't hear her crying in the laundry room, of how I kept waiting for her to say she was sorry, even long after she was gone. No one ever said sorry the way I needed them to, not her, not him. Maybe that's what this whole thing was teaching me, that some apologies never arrive, and healing isn't about waiting for them, it's about walking away anyway. I sat with that truth. Let it sink in like a bruise under the skin. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel whole. But I didn't feel hollow anymore either. I felt like a woman who had seen something real and survived it. The ride home felt different. The trees lining the road were the same. The radio played the same low hum of forgotten songs. But something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not fixed. Just less haunted. When I got back to my apartment, the air was still. I set the mug on the kitchen counter, toed off my shoes, and there it was, a small envelope, tucked halfway under my door. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. But when I picked it up, I knew. My name was written on the front. Just Elena. No love, no dearest, no fatherly flair, just my name, plain. Like he still didn't know how to hold it gently. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a single page, folded in half. Elena, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say everything I needed to while you were in the room. Some truths are easier to write. Even cowards can confess on paper. I paused, let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you can understand this one thing, maybe it will help. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I didn't know how to love well. My chest ached because yes, that was it, wasn't it? He loved me the only way he knew how. With distance, with silence, with guilt. I carried your photo in my wallet for years. Every time I looked at it, I promised myself I'd write. And then shame spoke louder than love. I swallowed hard. The page trembled in my hands. Your mother. She loved you in her own broken way too, and maybe I should have fought harder. For her, for you, for myself. But I didn't. And that's mine to carry. I could see his handwriting faltering by the end. More space between the lines. More hesitation. If there's a day you feel ready. There's a key inside the envelope. I kept something for you. It's in the old apartment. If you go when it's yours, not mine. And if you don't, I'll understand. Just know this, I loved you, even if I didn't show it right. Dad. I stared at the tiny silver key that had slipped out with the letter. Simple, cold, not to a house, not to a future, but to a past I thought I'd buried. I held it in my palm like it might bite, and I whispered, I don't know if I can forgive you, but maybe I'll try to understand. And maybe that was enough for now.